Hello friends, many of you have asked me to record the videos in English and therefore here we are. We'll be having these same videos in English as well as Hindi. So basically on the other channel, you will be finding bilingual videos which are having English script but the language which is recorded is Hindi. And here you will find the videos having English script and English audio. So basically if you want to understand in Hindi, then you can go to the other channel. I'll be providing the link in the description. If you want to understand in English, then you can stay here. If you want to download this slide, then you can find the link also in the description. Please go ahead and download it. So let us start by analyzing this topic, which is satellite launch vehicles of ISRO. We'll be majorly focusing on LVM-3, which is basically GSLV Mark III. But also we'll understand GSLV, PSLV, SSLV and the other historical satellite launch vehicles which ISRO has used till now. The context is on 14th of July, ISRO will be launching Chandrayaan-3 aboard its satellite launch vehicle LVM-3, that is GSLV Mark III. So let us start by understanding all of these satellite launch vehicles. Initially when we started, the first vehicle used was SLV-3, that is Satellite Launch Vehicle 3. Then we moved on to Augmented Satellite Launch Vehicle, that is ASLV. Then we came to Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle. Then it was Geosynchronous, GSLV, Geosynchronous Satellite Launch Vehicle Mark II and Mark III, which we'll be considering now. Also, we'll also have a look at SSLV, that is Small Satellite Launch Vehicle. So let us first start with SLV-3. So SLV, it basically means satellite launch vehicle. It was basically India's first experimental satellite launch vehicle, SLV. When we talk about SLV, it was having 4 stages and all of these stages were having solid propellants. The weight of SLV was 17 tons and its height was 22 meters. See, UPSC has been asking these questions about weight and height also, but majorly the focus has been asking about the weight of satellites which these SLVs can carry. So basically it would be better if you could learn these and if you could understand these in great detail. So basically this satellite launch vehicle, that is SLV, it was able to place 40 kg satellites, that is a satellite having a weight of 40 kgs in low Earth orbit. The first SLV was launched in 1980 on July 18 from Sriharikota range and it was having Rohini satellite. So when Rohini satellite was launched, India came into a very exclusive club. It was just the 6th country to be able to launch its satellites aboard its indigenous satellite launch vehicles. So then we moved on to the ASLV, that is Augmented Satellite Launch Vehicles. If we talk about ASLV, ASLV is having a lift off weight of 40 tons. It is almost 24 meters in height and it is having 5 stages, that is one stage more than SLV. So you can also understand that UPSC might ask you about the stages also. It could ask you a question about SLVs and it can ask you to arrange these SLVs in the order of their the stages which they are having. So you should be prepared about it and it would be a good idea if you could remember these. So it is having 5 stages and again, as we saw in SLV, all of these are solid propellants. Now if we talk about the capacity or the capability of ASLV, it can launch 150 kg satellites in lower Earth orbit, that is up to 400 kilometers. So you can now see that the capacity of ASLV is more than triple, that is 150 kgs and to a higher altitude, that is 400 kilometers. Now coming on to the next, that is PSLV. So basically SLV and ASLV, these are historical, these are not used anymore, but PSLV is one SLV, that is satellite launch vehicle, which has been considered as the workhorse of ISRO. Because this has been used multiple times, it is having multiple capabilities and it is having many variants. For example, ISRO is having 4 variants of PSLV, that is CA, DL, QL and XL. For the exam purpose, only XL is important because now we are using more of PSLV XL. If we talk about the weight of PSLV, it is 320 tons. Its height is 44.4 meters. Now, if we talk about the capacity, it is having the capacity to launch 1750 kg satellite. That is a satellite having a weight of 1750 kg into sun synchronous polar orbits. These orbits, these satellites can be launched up to an altitude of 600 kilometers. Also, the PSLV is having the capacity to launch the satellites also in the geostationary orbits also. What do we mean by a geostationary orbit? Basically, geostationary means that if we talk about the Earth, then Earth, let's say if a satellite is in the geostationary orbit, then for a person standing on Earth, this satellite will always be at a constant position because it is moving as per the rotation of Earth. So that is why this satellites, these are called geostationary satellites, and the orbit is called geostationary orbit. When a satellite has to be launched in geostationary orbit, first it is placed in GTO, that is geosynchronous transfer orbit. After that, it is lifted off to geostationary orbit. So basically, PSLV is also having the capability to launch the satellites into geosynchronous orbits. But then the satellites which it can launch into the geostationary orbits is a little lesser in weight. That is, it is almost 1425, that is 1425 kgs, which can be launched into geostationary or geosynchronous orbits. For sun synchronous polar orbits, it can launch up to 1750 kgs of satellites. If we talk about the stages, then we are having 4 stages in PSLV. The 4 stages, they are actually alternate. That is, first stage is having solid propellant, second stage liquid, then again solid, and then last again liquid. When we talk about the first stage, it is having a solid motor which is having 6 strap-on boosters. What is these boosters? If you have a look at the satellite launch vehicle, you will see here these things which are attached, and when a liftoff has been achieved and they are spent, they are then again separated during the launch itself. So these are called as boosters. Now here, if we talk about PSLV, there are 6 strap-on boosters in PSLV XL. Then again, the second stage is liquid. It is having a Vikas engine. You know, if whenever we are looking at PSLV or GSLV Mark II or Mark III, always you will see that the second stage is having liquid stage and having Vikas engine. Although the number of engines might be different, but then again the second stage is generally Vikas engine for PSLV and GSLV. It is a liquid stage. Now next is third stage is solid, as I told you, and fourth stage is again liquid. The main important thing which you must remember about PSLV is that it has already launched 2 very important rockets. The first rocket was having satellite, that is the mission Chandrayaan-1. Chandrayaan-1 mission, it was launched in 2008. Later in 2013, PSLV only was used to launch Mars orbiter mission, that is Mangalyaan. So you can see that the major achievements till now, that is Chandrayaan, Mars, these have been launched aboard PSLV. Now let us move on to the next, that is GSLV. So basically GSLV is having GSLV Mark II and GSLV Mark III. Mark III is obviously better than GSLV Mark II. Let us first understand that what actually is GSLV Mark II's capabilities. So GSLV Mark II, that is geosynchronous. Please remember that this is not geostationary. It means geosynchronous satellite launch vehicle. It is having a height of almost 51.73 meters. If we talk about the weight of GSLV Mark II is 420 tons. It is having 3 stages. So please remember, now the stages have been reduced. From PSLV, we are having 1 lesser stage. And from ASLV, we are having 2 lesser stages. So first stage is solid stage, which is having solid motor, but only 4 strap-on boosters. So again, we can see that from PSLV XL, we are having two lesser strap-on boosters. Then again, the second stage, as I already explained to you, that it is the Vikas engine, which is actually a liquid stage. Now the third stage is cryogenic engine. Now earlier, when we were having earlier versions of GSLV, then cryogenic technology we did not have. For that, we used to buy it from Russia. The engines, cryogenic engines, were bought from Russia. But we have worked hard and now we are having cryogenic engines. In fact, we have already launched 6 successful missions which are having cryogenic engines. Basically, cryogenic engine, it is having liquid hydrogen as the fuel, as well as liquid oxygen as an oxidizer. Now we are into the attempts of having this oxygen from the atmosphere itself, so that we do not need to carry it. But then again, in this times, we are having liquid hydrogen as the fuel and liquid oxygen as the oxidizer. Now this liquid hydrogen, it has to be stored at a very low temperature, and that is why this engine is called cryogenic engine, which is having at a very low temperature. So if we talk about the capabilities of GSLV, basically it can again place the satellites in both lower Earth orbit as well as geosynchronous transfer orbit. For lower Earth orbit, it can have satellites which are having weight of almost 6000 kgs. But for geosynchronous transfer orbits, it can handle satellites only in the weight range of 2250 kgs. So basically, it has been launching satellites like INSAT series for geostationary orbits. These are basically communication satellites because they stand at one place when we are talking about the position with respect to Earth. The other satellites which are moving around the polar orbit or sun synchronous orbit, they are generally remote sensing satellites or some other kind of satellites or weather satellites. So you can understand that till lower Earth orbit, we can place heavier satellites. But in the geosynchronous transfer orbit, we can place only lighter satellites having a weight range of around 2250 kgs. Now, if we go to the GSLV Mark III, GSLV Mark III, it can also be called as LVM-3. So again, LVM-3, it is heavier than basically GSLV Mark II. So LVM-3, its weight is 640 tons. But then its height is lesser. Please remember this. It can be asked as a trick question that height of GSLV Mark III, that is LVM-3, is only 43.5 meters. It is having 3 stages just like the GSLV, but then again they are a bit different. The first stage here is having 2 S200 strap-on boosters. Here the boosters, they are named S200 and they are 2 in number. So basically in the first stage we are having 2 boosters which are named S200. Then again the second stage, as I already told you, is the liquid stage. It is having Vikas engine, but here please remember that we are having 2 Vikas engines. So again the capability increases. And the third stage, as we just talked, it is the cryogenic stage. And as I told you, now India has the capability to produce cryogenic engine indigenously. Again, LVM Mark III, that is GSLV Mark III, it can launch satellites both in lower Earth orbit as well as in geosynchronous transfer orbit. If we talk about lower Earth orbit, it is having the capability to launch satellites weighing 8000 kgs. But for geostationary satellites which are placed in geosynchronous transfer orbit, it can only place the satellites which are in the weight range of 4000 kgs. So you can see that very light satellites, that is not very light but then again lighter than lower Earth orbit satellites, can be placed using LVM-3. Now again, see, this is the most important topic here because Chandrayaan-3 will be launched on July 14 aboard this satellite launch vehicle Mark III, that is GSLV. But then again, there is another category of satellites which is now being used by ISRO. It is actually the satellite, it is called a small satellite launch vehicle, that is SSLV. Basically, why ISRO wanted to develop a small satellite launch vehicle, that is SSLV? The reason is, first of all, the cost of PSLV and GSLV is very high. The cost of SSLV, it will be very low as compared to GSLV and PSLV. Again, if you want to launch one satellite aboard PSLV or GSLV, you have to wait for the whole assembly because the turnaround time is very high. If you have launched one mission, then you will have to wait for the other mission because it takes some time to assemble the PSLV and GSLV. But here, SSLV, it will be having a lower turnaround time so that the next mission can be launched in lesser duration of time than is required for PSLV or GSLV. Then again, here in small SSLV, we'll be providing on-demand service. That is, if you are able to pay for this SSLV, then we can provide you exclusive launch. See, PSLV was placing many satellites. Almost in one mission, I remember almost 100 satellites were also placed by PSLV. But sometimes what happens? Many countries, they want to launch their satellites instantaneously. They do not have much time. For example, let's say one country is already having some kind of satellite in some kind of orbit. Now that satellite has failed and it wants to replace this satellite. So it wants to launch the satellite for the replacement and it does not care about the money. For that, earlier we used to have PSLV and we used to wait for PSLV so that we can have a satellites, almost 10, 20, 40, 50 satellites so that they can be launched together. But now small SSLV, that is small satellite launch vehicle, it can be used on demand. If you can pay for it, we can launch even one single satellite also. So now it can be flexible in having the satellites and you can launch one satellite, you can launch 2, 3 depending upon the capabilities. Then again, the infrastructure which is required for launching GSLV and PSLV is much more complicated as compared to small satellite launch vehicle. It does not require so many complexities and it can be launched with a lot less infrastructure also. If we talk about the specifications, it is having 34 meters height and the weight is 120 tons. If we talk about the stages, that is the propellant used, it is having 3 stages. Basically, these are the 3 stages which are all solid. That is, the propellant which is used is solid. But then again, there is also a liquid stage which is called as VTM, that is the terminal stage. The full form is Velocity Trimming Module. This is the terminal stage, Velocity Trimming Module. This is the 3rd stage. In fact, this is the 4th stage. The 3 stages are solid and this is kind of a 4th stage which is called as Velocity Trimming Module and it is the liquid stage. Please remember this. This might be important for your examination. If we talk about the capability of SSLV, see, understand, as I have just told you, the basic idea of having SSLV is to provide launch services to either small countries or even startups or even universities or research platforms which have just created their own small satellites. In fact, it will be generally used to launch nano satellites, micro satellites or mini satellites which are very small in size. So basically, if we talk about its capability, it can launch a single satellite of 500 kg. If required, 500 kg satellite could be launched up to a planar orbit of 500 kilometers altitude. But then again, multiple satellites can also be launched. For example, we can launch 3 satellites ranging from 10 kg to 300 kg up to the planar orbit of 500 kilometers. So you can understand, basically the idea here is to provide a low cost alternative to PSLV, GSLV so that we can go ahead and capture the commercial space market which is now opening up. In fact, we have also set up bodies like Antrix, which are the commercial arm of ISRO, and the idea is to now have a pie of the multi-billion dollars market, space market, which is now being developed, and private sector is actively participating in that. Also, we are having many other satellite launch vehicles and other rockets which will be used for further purposes. For example, we are developing a reusable vehicle, RLV, so that we can use it in Gaganyaan. But then again, we'll talk about it when it is being launched or we are having more information and when it is important for your examination. So basically, this is the idea behind ISRO's satellite launch vehicle. So now we have started these lectures also in English language. Please let me know how you like them, and if you want me to continue with the English language, or are you satisfied with the Hindi audio itself? And if you want to see it in English language, please let me know so that we can continue with this series. Thank you so much. If you like it, please do like it and then share it, and please subscribe, tell your friends so that we can move ahead and make many more videos. If you want me to make a video on any kind of topic, please leave it in the comments. I'll try to make it as soon as possible. Thank you so much.